So we are going to start to talk through the basics of Fibonacci. So Fibonacci sequencing is the tool that I leverage the most, and you'll find that most traders probably will leverage this the most. It is what most of the algorithms are derived from, and it offers you a mathematical approach to formulating more educated decisions about entries and adding additional confluence. So to start, we're going to highlight what's important to us in the Fibonacci tool that Thinkorswim offers. So if you go to your drawing tools and then select the percentage sign, which is your Fibonacci retracement, and then just anywhere add in yours will not look like this right up front, but just connect a line and make a Fibonacci retracement. Double click on it or two-finger click on Mac and go into Edit Properties and replicate what you see here. What we're interested in is the 50% retracement, the 61.8, the 1.618, and the negative 0.236. And with those, you can do visually what makes sense to you, but I typically always operate with mine set in these settings. And then from there, if you save as default, it should look like this. Now, what are Fibonacci retracements? Well, they are mathematical calculations about specific pullback amounts and the level at which an extension or a sequence is considered complete. And what I mean by that is they're trend tools. So more than anything, you need movement in order for Fibonacci to be successful. You don't need a lot of movement because you can do this on any time frame, but you do need movement. So to that extent, let's take the example of we'll have a bullish move. And we start to find the top, right? Price moves up and then starts to find the top. What we're going to do with our Fibonacci retracement is we're going to capture on a bullish move the low point, and then our top end is going to be the high point of that move. And you'll notice what you're given is a zone that's built out by two lines. We've got a 50% retracement and a 61.8% retracement. Now, what do those do? Those to us indicate what we should consider in terms of another long entry, right? Because looking somewhere around here, as we're not in this vicinity, does not give us a really strong identifier or strong confidence in the return to bullish form. So this is not something that I recommend you use exclusively up front. I recommend you pair this with other things such as support and resistance, change control, supply and demand. And when you get that combination, then it gives you additional confluence and confidence. So what I would envision happening is, let's just say that we've got a piece of support right in that zone, and price starts to retrace back towards it. I can then make the decision based on where that piece of confluence is. In this case, it lines up pretty closely to the 50, if not dead on. I would say, looking at that, say, okay, well, we've got a piece of support here and we've got a pretty clean retracement. I would consider entering long at the 50% retracement. And then so you make your long entry and you start to think about, well, where is this going? Where can I safely exit a trade, or where can I add as my target once my brackets get taken out? Where do I want my runner to get taken out? Well, again, if you start thinking about zones and price levels, if you've got a negative 23.6% completion, with some support or resistance, well, that's a pretty good indicator that that particular zone and that particular level might be of great importance and might be of interest. So what you would typically think to see is that, much like you, in this long trade, everyone who's entered long here has price targets set for their take profits around the negative 23.6. That is, in the Fibonacci sequencing, the completion point. So when you get a clean retracement, you're, other than other pieces of information along the way, such as additional support and resistance levels or change control, other than those pieces of information, the negative 23.6 is your next most important piece of information in terms of trade exits, because this gives you the area that most people using Fibonacci, which is the majority of traders in the market, will be looking, right? And the reason that Fibonacci works so cleanly is because of that last statement. So many people, so many traders, so many institutions, algorithms, everything uses Fibonacci because it is the singular mathematical formula and hard number that you can give yourself in trading. Everything else is subjective, but Fibonacci, when you're using sequencing, is really the only hard number you can give yourself. So you have hundreds of thousands of millions of traders entering here, and then the same number with this set as their price target. So what you would expect to see is, because of those orders coming off here, price starting to turn around right here, and then start to pull back. Now this opens up sequencing. This opens up more beyond just an entry and an exit. Now we can get into the next leg of our sequence. If both of these are clean, either the 50 or the 61.8, and then we push towards the negative 23.6, a clean entry and a clean exit means that this sequence is valid. And this sequence is something that you can start to consider other entries on. And what I mean by that is you fib the next leg. So you take where the clean bullish entry was at the 50, and you take where the clean exit was at the negative 23.6, and you replot the same type of movement, right? So you grab the low, you pull it up to your new high, and you have now a new entry that this time you can start to use a bit more exclusively because we're in a successful sequence that has established itself. So now, even with no additional pieces of information, if they're there, then great. But with the no additional pieces of information, I can look to the next iteration within this Fibonacci sequence, entering long at whatever level I choose fit, and exiting as we come up to the negative 23.6. And this sequence is valid until one of two things happens. Either the take profit is broken, or we retrace a bit too far and we push through our next leg, or our retracement areas. Either of those breaks the sequence and, to me, invalidates. So I'm no longer looking for trades in that particular sequence. But that's for another video. What we're getting into now is specifically the next move here would be indicative of your low to your high, which in this case, the new low and your new anchor is going to be your previous retracement, and your new high is going to be where that take profit happened. Now this is all great to establish in practice, but on paper, but if we start to look at this in practice, and this move in particular down, again, this can be done on any time frame. So if I look at this from the perspective of, I'm not sure why this isn't expanding for me. I'm going to change time frames really quick and then come back to it. Okay, there we go. So if we start to look at it from the context of this move right here, the first and most straightforward usage that you can use for Fibonacci is the swing high, or the true top, of the move to the swing low, right here. Clearly that didn't work, but this is something that many people would look at. Now this is a very large time frame, but that covers the first piece of movement that you can leverage with Fibonacci is, again here, the true high to the true low. And again, you can see that this sequencing isn't fantastic on the ride down because nothing really works. Now that's not to say that other aspects of this won't have solid fib sequencing. So you can then look at this in a few other ways. Finding movement within movement is sometimes challenging. But when you think about what Fibonacci is, it's a trend tool. And so when you start to get this movement down, you can look at this in one of two ways. You can look at your anchors as either the true high to where the retracement begins, or your true low, right? So we've got movement from our singular move down to the low at which we start to turn around. Or you can look at it impulsively. And what does that mean? Well, this area right here doesn't instill a lot of really aggressive movement. It doesn't seem like we've made up our mind in order to take the fall down. I would say that more so happens around here, where then we make the decision. You can see the more aggressive move down where this candle is much bigger than this candle, and this is a bearish move followed up by another bearish move, and then we really start to make the decisive move down. So while this is your true high, this is your impulsive high. And when we say our impulsive high, this is more so just elaborating on this is where the move truly begins. And so if we plot this out, you can see that we then get some pretty clean tests of this zone, and we come down in an area that's relatively close to our negative 23.6. Now, again, the sequencing isn't perfect on this rundown, but there are a few points where it gets highlighted really well. So now let's start to look at the next piece of movement. If you think about what we talked about with our next leg, it is typically your retracement that starts it. Now we know that the low didn't really hold, and we never really got a retracement out of it, but we can still use this as our new anchor. So if we bring this down, you can see how patience is important here, because this gets relatively close. And yes, we get a nice move out of that. But when you start to think about sequencing and you start to think about, well, where did price really turn around? And let's just clear these off for a second. When you think about where did price really turn around, it wasn't until here that price made a direct move upward. So thinking about the impulsive nature of this move, or the true swing, I would not consider either this nor this to be a true definitive retracement. These are just little blips. This to me indicates the retracement. So this is going to be my next leg that I'm looking at. And if we plot that out, we finally get a nice clean retracement here. Nice and perfect 50% touch. And this highlights why patience is important, because this, albeit a great move, retraces back up into that zone. Now we'll look at potentially finding another area of interest on the way down. And it's okay. This is the reason that I wanted to highlight this rundown, is because it's okay if you don't find perfect sequencing, because fibs can work without being in a sequence, without being in a true sequence. This would be our next move down. You can see that no matter where we plot this on the way down, there's no retracement that works. There's no retracement that comes back up that gives us a deep enough retracement to this level. That's okay. We can then look at and say, well, where's my next impulsive move? And I would look at this and say that my next impulsive move is really one candle. It's here to here. It's basically this move. You get your wick as the true high and your wick as the true low down on the bottom, but this is the impulsive move that I see. So if we take and plot that out, well, we get a okay 61.8 down to an okay negative 23.6. Not perfect, but okay. And now price really starts to move back up. So if we start to move over, you can see that we're running straight up and there's not really much room for retracement on the 4 hour. So let's go down to the hour and see if we can't find anything that looks like it might be indicative of what a solid fib retracement would look like. And looking, again, zooming out and changing your perspective makes a big difference, because looking at a few zones, right, we're very rangy here. There's likely not going to be a ton that's Fibonacci related here. Same here. But if we look at a bit lower in this zone, then it seems like we might have some retracements. They do look a little deep, but let's explore. So if we take our fibs and we find our true low, and then we move this up to our true high, which is where we identify that topper and start to move out of it, well, this actually looks pretty clean. We get a nice clean 50% retracement and a nice clean run up that barely front runs that negative 23.6. So our next move out of this would then be find this high and bring it here. So we've now got, let's remove this for clarity for a minute. We've got our, just like the drawing that we did up front, we've got our low to our high, to our retracement, to our completion, and our next leg, looking at all of this, we get rid of the fib, if we get rid of the trend line, this, then our next move would be this leg. So if we clear this all off and fib out that individual leg, we've got another nice retracement, even another test of the retracements, and then a nice run up to our target areas. Now you can see what happens when we get up to that area. We invalidate this because now this fib doesn't come deep enough. It's not in the sequence, but that's okay. It doesn't have to be. We still can take our movement and see if we can't find another area to work with. Now, because we're not in a sequence, we don't have to use our low, right? If we pull up our low, we do still get the clean 50, but in this case, either here or here would be acceptable. If we remove this, you can see that both work. So if we leave that on there, we get our impulsive move, and using our anchor that was at our previous retracement, we also get our swing move. And both hit kind of closely on this candle right here, and then we've got another area to take profit here. However, we continue up and there's no real sequencing happening. It's just more individualistic looks at fibs. That's kind of a basic primer on Fibonacci and how you can use it. It can be singular in its instance, or it can be amidst a sequence. It can be used for both entries and exits. It will take some practice and some time to work with, but that is the basics of Fibonacci, and we'll go into the more advanced sequencing portion in a few videos, but that really covers the basics of Fibonacci. It works both bullish and bearish. It is a trend identifier, and it gives you solid information about where your pullbacks should kind of turn around, hence the retracement name of Fibonacci.